Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, May 26th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The Prime Minister's office today declined comment when IBA News asked about a report in Haaretz that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed willingness to discuss future borders in negotiations with the Palestinians. This was reportedly the first time since taking office that Netanyahu has voiced willingness to discuss the size of settlement blocks and their borders with Palestinians. According to Haaretz, Netanyahu told EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini that this goal would be to reach understandings on the borders of settlement blocks that Israel would annex under any peace agreement. Mogherini was in Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the declared intention of determining whether talks between the two sides can be renewed. According to Haaretz, Netanyahu's main goal at the meeting was to display readiness and even eagerness for resumption of talks. Right at the start of the gathering, Netanyahu reportedly restated his commitment to the principle of two states for two peoples, and that his support for the establishment of a demilitarized Palestinian state hasn't changed. Mogherini responded with a diplomatic gesture of her own. Instead of using the phrase two-state solution, she used the phrase Israel prefers, which is two states for two peoples, which acknowledges Israel's demand for recognition as the nation-state of the Jewish people. Palestinian leaders rejected the reported comments by Prime Minister Netanyahu. PA Foreign Minister Raed al-Maliki called the remarks meaningless jibber-jabber. Another Palestinian official said that they reject what Netanyahu said about settlement blocks as being totally unacceptable. He termed all of the settlements as being illegal and illegitimate, including those in Jerusalem. Netanyahu's reported willingness to discuss borders of settlement blocks in peace talks was quick to draw the wrath of Habayit Yehudi's Uri Ariel. The agriculture minister posted on Facebook that it would constitute a dangerous, unprecedented offer. He went on to issue a thinly veiled threat to break apart the coalition, saying that if there is truth in the report, the proposal is a dangerous precedent that defies the first article in the government guidelines, that the Jewish people have an indisputable right to a sovereign state in the land of Israel, its national and historic homeland. Former Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman wasted no time in criticizing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the abrupt dismissal of Foreign Ministry Director General Nissim Ben-Shitrit. Speaking ahead of his Yisrael Beitenu party faction, Lieberman blasted the lack of clarity of the government's foreign policy and what he called conflicting statements by the Prime Minister.
It's not Dory Gold, but it's an approach that, it's really unclear what is our policy. If two-state solution still our official policy, or we adopted another policy, I think that we must clarify what our policy. The director or another person, it doesn't matter. The real matter, it's only the policy, and it's unclear for me what our official position, what our official policy.
Joining us now is Labor Knesset member Dr. Nachman Shai. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Laura.
Is there anything really new in this Netanyahu proposal on talks with the Palestinians on borders and settlements?
I don't know. It's very hard to know where Netanyahu stands. There are probably few Netanyahus, more than one. One who made a terrible statement in the eve of the elections, and one who said totally different things just a week ago when he met the European foreign minister. So it's hard to know where we are, and we just have to wait and see. And that's exactly what Netanyahu would like, to postpone any decision, any progress, as much as possible.
Ministers on the right, including Agriculture Minister Uri Ariel, were reportedly shocked by Netanyahu's statements of the report in the Haaretz and are threatening to bring down the new government. Your thoughts?
They are not going to bring down the government very soon. I have no doubts about that. They haven't started yet. But they can make troubles to Netanyahu as much as they can, because he totally depends on them, especially on those two members of Hatkuma. They can bring down the government, but they wouldn't do it until the policy will be clarified, and you can trust Netanyahu, it wouldn't be clarified.
Dr. Shai, why don't you consider yourself joining the government to move the peace process forward?
We would like very much to move the peace process, but we don't see any chance with this present government. You don't really expect neither Netanyahu nor any one of his coalition partners to push the peace process forward. It's not even in the the government political platform. So what are we going to do? We prefer to stand the opposition and to embark a strong and long struggle against the government, bring them down, and form our government, which will be able to take Israel to a different direction.
You don't believe Netanyahu's new plan?
No, I don't think. I think it's just tactics. There's no strategy. The major weakness of Netanyahu that he has no strategy. He offers this, he offers that, but you really don't know where he is. And if he truly would like to see some progress on the Palestinian issue, we will help him. I have no doubt about that. But from the opposition benches, there's nothing wrong about that.
Dr. Shah, you keep on criticizing Netanyahu, but many prime ministers, including one from parties you support, have also negotiated with the Palestinians and find out sooner or later that they refuse to compromise. What leads you to believe that the Palestinian side is more willing now to compromise than they were in the past?
First of all, I agree with you. It's not only us, it's them too. And I don't blame our government just for that. But I would like to see the will. I'd like to see the initiative. I'd like to see the drive to reach an agreement. I don't see it. Don't even a trial to get forward. And that's what I blame Netanyahu and his government for. We believe that we have to try. Never stop trying. Because if we don't, the vision will be a no Jewish, no democratic state. And we are unable to foresee Israel's future like that.
Responsibilities have been taken away from the foreign ministry, given to other ministries to satisfy coalition agreements. The director general was dismissed, and Netanyahu advisor Dr. Dori Gold was put in his place. Is this any way to deal with the daunting job of Hasbara to improve Israel's image?
There's no Hasbara or public diplomacy without a policy. And I don't see the policy yet. I'm all the way for a ministry for public diplomacy. That's what my PhD is all about. But I would like to see a policy that we can so-called explain or market or take around the world. But I don't see it yet. I totally agree that the government needs a ministry for public diplomacy because we are doing very bad on the international scene, and especially under the pressure of the present PDS campaign. We have to do much better, and I don't see it happening yet.
MK Nachman Shai, thank you so much for being
You're
our
most
guest.
welcome. Thank you.
In other news, Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat is reportedly furious over the possible appointment of Likud MK Zev Elkin as Minister of Jerusalem Affairs. Elkin asked for the portfolio after the Strategic Affairs Ministry was taken away from him yesterday and given to Gilad Erdan as part of his package deal with Prime Minister Netanyahu to convince him to join the government. The mayor's office released a statement saying that the decision to form the Jerusalem Affairs Ministry was made against his wishes and contradicts that Prime Minister Netanyahu's promise and the cabinet decision from Jerusalem Day that the Prime Minister's office would be in charge of advancing Jerusalem interests in partnership with the mayor's office. Joining us now is Jerusalem Post political pundit Gil Hoffman. Gil, thanks so much for coming in. Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat has now joined those who feel deceived by the Prime Minister. Is that potentially a problem for Netanyahu?
Look, Laura, the mayor of Jerusalem is an ally of Netanyahu, and he can't bring him down politically, whereas any member of Knesset can cause a big upheaval in the Knesset that could give Netanyahu big headaches. If giving Elkin the ceremonial title of the minister who's in charge of Jerusalem was what it took to pacify him, it was a small price for Netanyahu to pay.
Does this new settlement proposal from Netanyahu signal a quick end to a fragile coalition, perhaps leaving an opening for the Zionist Union to enter the coalition?
Laura, I think you're taking Haaretz too seriously, okay? And the first rule
From the Post,
of this government is not to take Haaretz too seriously. And so, you know, Haaretz played up statements that Netanyahu tends to make about how the settlement blocks are important. It does. I wouldn't read too much into it, though. I would say, though, that Netanyahu has made more and more dovish statements since the election ended, and the world will continue to hear him make dovish statements. And I think the world is really wrong about him, painting him as such a hawk with such a right-wing government.
He certainly is not making himself very popular among his own party, though, is he?
He finished all the problems in his own party. Everybody got enough to get them by, maybe not what they wanted, but enough to not cause him any more problems. I'd like to think the mess is somewhat over.
Behind us.
Behind me, anyway. You know, for political correspondents who've been working very hard over the last 6 months, maybe now that everyone's theoretically satisfied, will be able to relax a little bit more.
Gilad Erdan, he didn't get all that he wanted, but he did join the government. Benny Begin apparently must now resign from the cabinet, and Zev Elkin is unhappy with that the ministry has been taken from him. Are we heading toward a period of relative quiet in which we can get to the business of governing, or can you see more ego and politicking in the future?
Okay, so give it another week or two, because there's going to be a fight over the chairmanship of the different committees in the Knesset. For instance, Avi Dichter is very upset he's not the head of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. And the Likud has 3 committees and 15 members of Knesset fighting over them. The Zionist Union, the only important job they have is chairman of the Knesset Economics Committee. They have 24 MKs. People like Nachman Shai could only dream of getting a job like that. And so there are still some headaches ahead, but then we'll get quiet and we can start governing just in time to take a summer vacation.
Thank you. As we know, there are only 61 members of the coalition. What is the first major crisis that's likely? Where is it likely to come from?
Look, the major crises are going to be over matters of religion and state, where you have severe differences of opinion within the members of Knesset of the coalition. And if there's ever going to be an attempt by the international community to force some kind of agreement on Israel and Netanyahu caves into it, that can cause problems with the right.
Which reform are they most likely to tackle first?
I mean, the housing issues are going to be tackled within the state budget that is already going to start being debated soon. And so a lot of the focus over the next few months is going to be socioeconomic and therefore not exactly what's cared about around the world, but is taken very seriously by the rank and file over here.
Just one short, quick question. What do you think is going to happen with Reshut HaShidur if it stays in Bibi's hand?
Well, it was Erdan who was the one pushing for this reform to take place. Netanyahu might like the way that the IBA is right now. Maybe he will allow a status quo. That all remains to be seen, but God bless the IBA English News, and I hope that you're around forever and ever and ever.
Thanks so much for coming in, Gil Hoffman. It was great to have you. This week marks 15 years since the IDF withdrawal from South Lebanon and the dismantling of the so-called security zone. The event has had repercussions on both sides of the northern border and was widely covered by the media in both countries. We get more on this report by Dennis Zinn.
It was during his address last night, marking 15 years since what he called the Israeli retreat from Lebanon, that Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah called on all Lebanese factions to join his battle against the Islamic State. We face existential danger, Nasrallah said. These are forces yet unknown to the world. The Shiite leader was under pressure, and this is not surprising considering that his forces recently lost the crucial Idlib province in Syria and the strategic city of Tadmor. This and the body bags arriving in Lebanon daily from battles in Iraq and Syria are taking their toll. Many Lebanese are openly criticizing Nasrallah, and most recently, including senior Lebanese Shiite cleric Muhammad al-Husseini, who said that Nasrallah is leading Lebanon to civil war and ruin. Israel was clearly not on Nasrallah's agenda, although he did say that Hezbollah will not abandon any of its fronts and is ready and poised to attack. Officers in the IDF Northern Command have long recognized Nasrallah's difficulty. They said that despite the 100,000 rockets that Hezbollah claims to have threatening Israel, the organization is too entangled in other areas to worry the IDF. They also dismissed recent reports that terror tunnels have been burrowed under the Israeli border. And in a radio interview commemorating the IDF withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000, former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz said the decision to leave Lebanon was correct because the security zone was not effective anymore in protecting the northern border communities. Gantz was the commander of the Lebanon Liaison Unit at that time. He said that Hezbollah did grow stronger since then due to support from Iran and Syria, but it's now payback time and the organization is suffering. Israel has less to fear. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
The Australian government has announced it will seek to strip citizenship from dual nationals involved in terror activities. The country has been on high alert for attacks by radicalized Muslims and homegrown radicals returning from fighting in the Middle East. Australia also raised its threat level to high and has undertaken a series of high-profile raids in major cities. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott appointed a new counter-terrorism coordinator as part of the new security laws. Abbott told reporters that some 100 Australians were fighting in Iraq and Syria, backed by about 150 Australian-based facilitators.
This is a very serious problem. It is perhaps the most serious national security challenge that we will face in our lifetimes.
A holiday in Portugal didn't end well for many Israelis as the airplane they were to return home on was impounded in Lisbon. The move came by the order of Portuguese carrier Euro-Atlantic Airways, which claimed that Israel owes them millions of euros following a 7-year lawsuit. In December, the Portuguese Supreme Court ruled in favor of Euro-Atlantic and ordered Israel to pay damages estimated at $2 million. But Israel says the legal procedure is ongoing. A Israel official said the action taken by Euro-Atlantic was a vicious and unprovoked move without advance warning that took the travelers as hostages. The Airbus A320 is currently in Lisbon, and efforts are being made by the Israeli embassy to bring the passengers home. The Israel official added that the company has found alternative flights for some of the passengers, but others are being put up in hotels in Lisbon. Another name has been released in the crime crackdown operation known as Case 512. Mob boss Asi Abutbul is suspected of murdering underworld leader Moshe Hadass 15 years ago. He is also being held in connection with an assassination attempt of former confidant Yoram El-Al and Avi Yamin 14 years ago, and the attempted kidnap and assault of another criminal figure. Abutbul's remand was extended by the court for a further 2 weeks, along with additional suspects in the crime ring. So far, 60 suspects have been remanded. Meanwhile, mobster Zev Rosenstein has been transferred to the Hermon prison to avoid contact with suspects in the 5112 case, being held at the Ayalon prison. The Palestinian Football Association is in continuing full throttle in its efforts to get Israel suspended from the International Federation of Soccer, or FIFA. This despite the visit last week of FIFA President Sepp Blatter to Israel and the Palestinian Authority to try and resolve the issue without suspending Israel. The Palestinian Football Association, headed by Jabril Rajoub, has long accused Israel of hampering its activities and restricting the movement of players between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The Israel Football Association says the matter is not in its control because the Israeli government imposes the restrictions for security reasons. Rajoub told a news conference in Ramallah that all indicators are pointing towards a vote to suspend Israel this coming Thursday.
Last week, President Blatter was here, and he tried to find a solution. However, and despite the good intentions of Mr. Blatter, the Israeli Football Association has chosen to continue being a tool for the apartheid rather than one for peace. Unfortunately, I have to say the Israeli Association is following the political agenda of their extremist government. This matter has to be solved by the FIFA Congress, the right addresses for such cases. If we do not have a dramatic change, you should expect a vote on the Israeli Association is suspension by Thursday.
In local money matters, the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading, while shares were down on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here are the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the forecast, and no relief in sight with extreme Sharav heat wave conditions predicted across the country tomorrow. And that's all for this broadcast. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow with more news from Israel and abroad. Until then, I'm Laura Cornfield wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.